Hey guys, if you have been on my channel for a while, you might have noticed that the Buddha's Dhamma practice, or the meditative practice, has an order in which it should be performed, otherwise it will not, under any circumstances, give you the desired results. If you try to skip ahead, you will simply get nowhere, and it is absolutely crucial to understand not only what to do, but also when to do it, and why you do it. Otherwise, you will at best half-heartedly follow the meditative practice. In this video, we will go through the various different stages of progress until you attain the right view or stream entry. And a small warning, the order of practice is based on the Suttas, or the lectures that the Buddha gave alone, and very much goes against basically all modern, contemporary Buddhist traditions. And this might feel bad to some people. But without further ado, let us just begin. And what you see here is more or less a timeline that I have created. To the left, we see the Layman stage. And this is a normal mode of being for basically everyone around. And then, when you transcend the Layman stage and actually notice that there is a problem with your mode of being, and that you actually see that it does not bring you any happiness, only then can you actually start transcending being a layman and working towards being a noble one. And that, well, progress towards becoming an Arya, a noble one, or a stream enterer can be divided into certain phases. The number of phases does not really matter. I have just chosen those 5 that I have displayed in this figure. There is the novice phase, the intermediate phase, the advanced phase, and then the, well, expert phase of the noble one, the stream enterer, who has actually understood what Dhamma even is and what Dhamma even means. And the size of the circle pretty much stands for how long a certain phase lasts when you have, for example, had a divine messenger event that has shown you that there is something wrong with your mode of being and that it does not lead to lasting happiness. And what we can see here in this figure is pretty much that basically all people nowadays, and it is really basically everyone, starts with reading certain types of modern books about meditation. It might be books by very popular teachers like Eckhart Tolle and Mahasi Sayadaw, or any of the other great and well-known spiritual teachers. However, many times those books are of a very shallow nature, and they do not help people too much. In the beginning, surely, they give you some great relief, and the techniques that are in there help you to some degree. For example, the contemporary metta. It helps you feel something at first. It is akin to going to the gym for the first time, and you will have intense muscle soreness afterwards. So it really feels like you have done something, and there is some immediately gratifying component involved. However, the Dhamma is ultimately about patience and practice and delay of gratification. So those immediately, well, feelable techniques are usually not what the Buddha taught about. And people who are very sincere about their practice will notice that over time. So where they will start developing a daily habit, they will start some kind of sense restraint practice, as basically all meditation techniques that exist nowadays also have a component of sense restraint. So they have you sit on a meditation cushion, and then for that time you at least don't do worse things, and thus some progress is ensured even if you have not planned on doing that. So you pretty much get some results as a byproduct, but it cannot get you all the way done, because it is, in essence, a doing. And the Dhamma practice that the Buddha taught is all about stopping to do those things that are harmful to you. And no amount of doing or following any technique can ever achieve that. Only stopping to do certain things, which is what sense restraint is, by the way, at least for a time, can get you there. And after a while, based on self-honesty and noticing, well, that those techniques do not bring you freedom from suffering, can you advance beyond the layman stage. And I have included most of those modern teachings in the layman phase because they follow the same principle. They have the goal of making you feel good, most of the time. Not all teachers, but the vast majority, 99% I would say, is by now going against what the Buddha actually taught. So if any technique has a goal of making you feel immediately good, then it is not in line with what the Buddha taught, which is very important to acknowledge. And it troubles people a lot. Ultimately, Dhamma is about preparation for not suffering. It is not about dealing with suffering in the risen moment. Suffering just does not arise anymore. And based on all of that, can we enter the next phase of the novice? And it might hurt a bit that I call this the novice phase. But right now, you focus on enduring bad feelings in meditation. You want to work towards longer and longer sits of up to an hour, let's say, where you can just sit without doing anything in particular, by the way. But you want to be able to do that But after, I don't know, maybe 1 hour or being able to sit for 1 hour on end, there will not be any additional benefit anymore. Then you can just sit, and the mind has accepted that sitting is a part of your life, and you will not benefit from it anymore, which is also very important. And at that point, you must, transfer that enduring into all the other parts of your life. The meditative practice that the Buddha described transforms your entire life. And your entire life does not just happen on the meditation cushion. So you must, at any given time, endure whenever there is a bad feeling arise, and do not act out of it. And then it is also a good time to start keeping the 5 precepts. And by the way, this is very important. You never stop doing any of those practices here. You always keep the enduring. It is not just that you do it during the novice phase. All those things add on top, maybe with the exception of the modern Dhamma books and the contemporary metta. But the daily habit, the self-honesty, all of that stays. It adds on top. It is a foundation for all the other things to come. This is not a linear thing. You always keep the other things, and they transform more or less into the more advanced factors. And then based on the restraint of the 5 precepts, which can already be very, very hard to do, because you want to keep them for your entire life, and not just sometimes. The 5 precepts have to be kept all the time. Otherwise, you do not take them seriously. It is about renunciation, renouncing those things that you use to distract yourself. And then based on all those things, you can start reading better books. You can start seeking a sangha of noble people who can actually help you understand all those perplexing points that are usually badly explained nowadays. You can start undoing your wrong views, and this is one of the biggest hindrances. Dhamma is all about undoing, about non-doing, and not about adding on top. You just have to remove all those things that block you from progress. And when all those things culminate, you pretty much have acquired the mundane right view that enables you to progress. You also need faith and all those other things that are summarized under the mundane right view. But you can look at chapter 4 of my meditation lecture for more on that. And based on that, we can enter the intermediate stage. And there's no clear cutoff point between all those phases. They overlap all the time, by the way. And this part of the training focuses a lot on the Suttas. And you want to really start reading the original source texts of the Pali Canon. Because, and I can assure you, they are very right, every single one of them. The newer texts I would avoid, but those 8 books or 9 books that I have named in the first part of the meditation lecture are very, very good. And you should actually focus on those. And then, based on those suttas, based on reading them, if you have done all the prior training beforehand, you will start understanding them. And you will suddenly notice what the Buddha meant with all those things. And then you will notice, wow, a lot of the practice, maybe 90% of the actual training part, the part that you do in everyday life, is about clarifying your own intentions. All the time, not just in meditation. It has to transform your entire life, and it can only work based on sense restraint. Sense restraint reveals your intentions, otherwise you cannot see them. If you just try to sit sit on your chair doing absolutely nothing, you will notice how your mind still wants to do things. And when you stop doing that, then you notice, oh, that is what an intention even is. That is rooted in greed, aversion, or delusion. And then you will stop doing all those intentions that have the wrong root, namely that just force you based on a bad feeling, or on a good feeling, or on a neutral feeling. You pretty much stop all the actions in body, speech, and mind that are based on wanting more pleasure, wanting bad feelings to go away, or to distract yourself. And only based on that. And by the way, this is about renouncing those activities, never doing them again. Only based on that can the knowledge of the Dhamma find footing. It is about stopping to do those things without replacing them. You don't want to just replace an addiction to heroin with an addiction to cocaine and then an addiction to cigarette or anything like that. The craving, if you do it like that, would just remain just as strong. You want to permanently renounce those things. And for example, that leaves part of your day open to doing absolutely nothing. Sitting on your chair, doing nothing, not even meditating, nothing at all. This is what Dhamma practice truly means. You remove your dependence on the sensual domain, your dependence on having something to do all the time. And only when you have done that are you prepared to die. Because death is a point in time where you have to renounce your dependence on doing things, because you can no longer do anything when you grow old and sick or even die. And you want to do that before you die, so that you are prepared for death and are perfectly fine with it, perfectly at ease. This is what Dhamma practice is about. You prepare yourself in advance. You don't try to treat an immediately arisen bad feeling with some kind of technique. You want to prepare yourself in advance so that none of those things can ever arise again. And then, when we have thoroughly trained ourselves in virtue, and this is all virtue, by the way, there's nothing that is special to the Buddhas up until this point. Every religion in the world offers something that is akin to this, and even self-improvement is very much about all those things, just that you kind of choose a path of replacement, and not so much something that opens up time where you do absolutely nothing. Based on that, can you enter the advanced phases? And now it is really time for contemplation, really trying to understand what the Buddha said in the suttas. And once you found a single sutta that resonates well with you, then you just practice what is in there. The Buddha gave us instructions and not knowledge. Those suttas are meant to be put into practice. And every single one of them, or 95% of them, says the same thing. And if you understand one of them, then you have understood all of them. Then you have understood the Dhamma. And based on that, based on a thorough understanding of some good suttas, you can go into seclusion, where there is no one around you, no distraction whatsoever. And then, when your virtue is strong enough, you enter a state of samadhi, where your mind starts listening to you, and you no longer have to follow all your emotional impulses all the time. And this is a truly sublime and peaceful state of mind. And based on that, then can you actually make a breakthrough to the Dhamma and become a noble one, a stream enterer. And then you practically speaking, start periods of keeping the 8 precepts in seclusion, where you stop distracting yourself. This is what the 8 precepts are all about. Moderation in sensuality. It is about not sleeping too much, not enjoying too much theater plays and shows and everything like that. You really want to have time in your day where you try to do absolutely nothing. Not even meditating, just sitting on a cushion with your doors and windows closed, all screens turned off, and just looking at a wall or something, doing absolutely nothing. And based on that, there will be some distance created. And that distance is necessary to notice the 3 marks, the unownable nature of all of your experience. You want to notice that, and chapter 6 of my meditation lecture really focuses on that. And based on that, you can apply that same principle to your own intentionality, to your entire state of mind. And then you will notice that your entire experience as a whole is beyond you, is unownable. And then the right view can arise, and the right view is an earth-shattering experience, where your entire experience inverts itself. Before that, your sense of self took the center stage all the time. And afterwards, yourself moves into the background, and everything else comes first. It is truly like the Buddha described it. It is as something that was overthrown is turned right again. So someone has spilled, I don't know, a drink on the floor, and the cup was laying all scattered there, and then you put it right again. It's like seeing for the first time. It's like all those similes in the suttas. And it is a true moment of great relief that removes 99% of your suffering. And it is not that you have to cope from that point onwards. The suffering is simply gone. It does not arise anymore. There's no coping necessary. And this is something that goes so much against the grain of the world that most people cannot understand it. They choose a path that goes directly against it. They cultivate what they call jhana, which is essentially just following some kind of pleasure. And they recreate that all the time over their entire lives. And that is the opposite of Dhamma practice. It is just a more refined form of sensuality. When the Buddha was asked what sensuality is, he said, it is the delight in certain things. It is the sensuality. It is wanting things. It's in the craving. It's not in the things in the world. And for that matter, thoughts about sensuality or thoughts about wanting good feelings are also sensuality. And the Buddha was very clear on that. So this is very important to keep in mind. And once you had that insight, you understand what the actual practice of Dhamma, what this entire thing here that I presented even is, and what you must focus on. And then the noble path arises in you. This is a point where the noble eightfold path begins, and then right jhana becomes possible. People nowadays want to practice jhana at the first part, but jhana, as the Buddha explained it, was the culmination of the entire Noble Eightfold Path. And I have not even depicted the Noble Eightfold Path here. This is all the stuff that happens before. Technically speaking, you cultivate all those qualities at once. But the Noble Eightfold Path begins as soon as you become a stream enterer. This is just virtue, so to speak. And this is something that people usually do not like at all. And this is why their mental models, their understanding of the Dhamma does not fit. Because they think that they must practice the Noble Eightfold Path now, while they are not even a stream enterer. And this is truly a big problem. And this is what I mean with undoing wrong views. You kind of have to accept, okay, Dhamma practice as I am right now might be beyond me, but I will move into the right direction. I have not understood it, but I will try my very best to do it. And maybe here's some more important point. I have depicted at the top the level of progress here. In the beginning, we are pretty much practicing just the sila, just the precepts, just making our intentions visible, just the patimokkha, following all those rules. And this is always a kind of undoing the things that we do in everyday life. We stop distracting ourselves by all kinds of different things. And based on that, our mind starts listening to us, because that kind of restraint requires a very strong mind. We have to tame it so that it starts listening. And that state of a mind that is very malleable and very listening to what we want to say, that is a state of samadhi. That is a state of distance, a state of a mind that is kind of lofty. And based on that, we can, start cultivating actual qualities of the Noble Eightfold Path, while we feel that we only, progress in sila. But the entire development in sila can last years on end if you are not really diligent about it and do not see why it is necessary and all those things. But then samadhi arises somewhere and starts being there for, prolonged periods of time. It becomes more and more prominent. And at some point, when the samadhi and the sila are strong enough, when the foundation is there, then the knowledge and the instructions that the Buddha gave can find footing in your experience. It is not so much that you have not heard the right things. It is that you miss the foundation for those things to find footing in your mind. If you are developed enough in virtue and samadhi, and by that I mean literally just don't do things all the time. If you can sit for 3 hours a day on end, doing absolutely nothing, in solitary confinement, by the way, or pretty much, then a single sentence of the Buddha should be enough for the right view to arise in you. But most people are completely unwilling to do that, because it requires a lot of delay of gratification, a lot of patience. And this is not something that people nowadays bring to the practice. So just in summary, all the sila, all the samadhi, all the panya, all the discernment, or however you want to call it, it never stops. You never stop doing the sila. If you stop doing the sila, the entire path will crumble upon you. And this is not something that you want to happen to you. So you have to be very, very careful. Sila is a foundation, and you continue doing it until the very end. It is just that when you have the right view, it becomes higher virtue. And that is all that it takes. If you just do that, you will end up at arahantship. Because based on that, you will stop doing more and more things. And when you don't do anything anymore, then you are pretty much done. And it's not just that you become inactive and sit all the time. At some point, namely when you have the right view, there is a breakthrough where you suddenly start doing nothing while the body is still doing things. So you do not become a vegetable or something like that. It is just that the mental doing stops while the body can still do things. But anyway, I think I have talked long enough. Let us maybe now come to the most important point. First of all, Dhamma practice has an order. Skipping ahead will lead to stagnation, and you must keep that in mind. If you want to practice the jhanas in the beginning of the path, while it is the end, the culmination, shortly before Nibbana, the Buddha even called the first jhana the basis or the foundation of Nibbana, then you have a problem, and you can be very certain that whatever you practice is not the jhana that the Buddha was talking about. You first practice virtue gradually, and only then can you even see the Dhamma, namely upon attaining the right view. Even a single moment of seeing one of those 3 marks rightly means that you have become a noble one. Then you are a stream enterer. And people practice seeing the 3 marks all the time nowadays. They don't see them fully. If they saw them fully, then they would immediately become Aryas, noble ones. And the Buddha was very clear on that. For example, when he explained the hierarchy of merit, and he said that seeing anicca for the time of a finger snap is enough. It is much more meritorious than all the other things that you could do. Even erecting an entire city for arahants led by the Buddha is less meritorious than seeing anicca for the time it takes to snap a finger. And this is a knowledge that really takes time to sink in. So practicing really brings the most amount of merit. And it is not that you ever stop virtue, for example. You keep doing it all the time. You just add more things on top. Other things like samadhi are pretty much the culmination of virtue. And panya, or discernment, arises when the mind is calm enough and stops distracting itself all the time, which is basically a state of samadhi. And all the aspects have a right amount and the right time to be practiced. You have to balance things. It is not that you must practice virtue sometimes and then some samadhi or something like that. You practice all those things at once. It is not a linear thing. You just emphasize certain things where you might have a weakness. And in the end, there is no Dhamma without virtue, but virtue is not a Dhamma. If you cannot even see your own intentions of greed, aversion, and delusion, seeing the Dhamma is 100% impossible. So if you do not know what an intention is in your experience right now, and think that you are a stream enterer, then I have bad news for you, because you are not. Seeing your intentions very clearly all the time is an absolute prerequisite for seeing the Dhamma. But anyway, this should be enough for today. I think and hope that this should make the entire path, the entire training until stream entry much more clear in a very concise way. So if you like what I do here, even if you do not disagree, feel free to ask a follow-up question down below, or maybe leave me a comment or something like that. But until then, I wish you a pleasant day and goodbye.